Alberta's extremist NDP unveiled their attack budget. I call it an attack budget because it targets the oil and gas industry and those who work in it. I've never seen anything like it. I've seen attacks on the oil and gas industry before, usually from Ottawa, sometimes from the White House. But it's rare to see the government of Alberta itself take aim at the province's chief industry. It would be like the government of Saskatchewan declaring war on farmers, or the city of Windsor declaring war on automobiles. You already know some of the anti-oil proposals. The NDP couldn't wait for the budget to announce them: doubling the carbon tax, hiking corporate taxes, hiking taxes on higher income workers, in other words, everyone who works in oil and gas. They haven't yet announced their oil and gas royalty tax hikes. Those are coming soon. And then there's their global warming tax proposals. Those haven't come yet either. And all of this while the industry is already on its back because of low world commodity prices. It would be like Ontario bringing in a special tax on cars in 2008 during the Great Recession, or Newfoundland bringing in a tax on fishing boats during the cod crisis. These people are destroyers, not governors. But look at what they're doing. It's still 3.5 years until Albertans can throw them out. So they're partying. They're racking up the provincial credit card, throwing wild spending parties like teenagers who have the family home to themselves until their parents come back in a few days. Record spending on government unions. I'm sure it's a coincidence that Rachel Notley's husband, Lou Arab, is a senior union boss with CUPE, and her chief of staff, Brian Topp, is a former union boss. And many of her MLAs and cabinet ministers are former union bosses too. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. You've got a vicious cycle here because they're hitting oil companies so hard, they're going to get less and less money from the oil companies that remain in the province. I mean, you can't wring taxes out of companies that are losing money or leaving. So the ones that remain will just have to pay more and more, and they're going to have to borrow, the government's going to have to borrow at a record pace to meet the gap. They're predicting a $6.1 billion deficit this year. They're predicting that. It'll surely be higher. Ordinary Albertans are cutting back, but the NDP is going faster than ever, shoveling money to their friends in the civil service. Ralph Klein steered Alberta to debt-free status. Albertans tightened their belts and achieved that as a province through sacrifice. These NDPers are undoing all of that in their feast for their government union friends. Debt will hit $18.9 billion this year, and $47 billion by the time their term is up in 2019, 2020, just 4 years from now, if you believe their predictions. So instead of cutting a dime from unionized government workers, the NDP is spending more. It's the private sector that has to bear the burden. But let me give you some statistics. All of these are from the government's own website. Employment insurance claims in Alberta are up 82%. 82%. And yet they're raising taxes on employers. Manufacturing in the province is down 14%. Wholesale business down 7.7%. Housing starts down 18.8%. All these numbers are year over year. Motor vehicle sales down 13.6%. Building permits to build anything down 21.9%. Do you think any of these problems will be made better by jacking up taxes, personal taxes, corporate taxes, carbon taxes, global warming taxes, royalty taxes, or by racking up a deficit to pay to bureaucrats? I'm not going to go through the whole budget, but let me point out one or two things. First, their attack on oil and gas is already costing tens of thousands of jobs, great jobs. So how does a socialist NDPer who's never run a business in her life think that jobs are made? Well, by announcing, get this is from her budget, a jobs creation incentive program where unionized government bureaucrats will hand out little bundles of $5,000 to people who hire new employees on a first-come, first-served basis. Yeah, no risk of corruption there, eh? But really, take Shell, which just canceled their Carmen Creek oil sands project, including 1,200 construction jobs gone, poof, and 250 permanent jobs. That's a multi-billion-dollar, 30-year project. Shell decided to take a $2 billion write-off, shut it down. Does anyone who has ever lived in the real world think that back at Shell headquarters, they're saying, oh, look at that. We'll get $5,000 if we go ahead and do it and hire people. Let's go back into Alberta, which is a war on against the oil sands, because they've offered us a rounding error on our employment costs. They thought Alberta is so risky that they would rather lose the $2 billion they've sunk into their project, and the NDP thinks that a new government program handing out a few trinkets will fix things, handing out money taxed from existing businesses. Put aside the inevitable corruption. Does anyone think businesses are started by the government handing out bags of $5,000 like that? Let me show you a few more charts. I'm too mad to go through the whole budget, but let me show you an analysis not by the government propagandists, but I want to show you some stuff from an economics professor at the University of Calgary, Trevor Tomby, who did some great charts in rapid succession. I just took these off his Twitter feed, and I think they tell the story much clearer than the government did, obviously, because he's not in the government propaganda business. Look at this. The NDP is desperate to make their numbers look better than they are, so they fake it. They fudge their numbers. Their oil prediction for their budget, for oil prices, is $20 a barrel higher in the next few years than the consensus futures market. So the NDP is hoping and praying that oil prices will go up $20 higher than anyone in the oil business thinks they will. And they're just going to use those fantasy numbers because they know that media party journalists are too dumb to even know what any of this means. Well, it means that the NDP is lying when they say they'll be able to get out of the hole that they're digging. Here's another chart by this same economist, U of C. Again, just simple economics here, more fudging in the budget. The amount of money the province expects to make off oil royalties just isn't based in reality. It's off by $500 million a year. That's what happens when you make a leftist social worker your finance minister. But this is the one that bugs me. Check this out. Every Albertan is going through cutbacks right now. Some are getting laid off altogether, so that's, I guess, 100% cutback. But even those who keep working are having their wages reduced. This is government statistic here. The average Albertan is earning 1.5% less this year than they were last year. So why is the NDP giving more money to government unionized workers, bigger budgets, bigger staffs, to their union friends? Why? Why? Look at this, over 4% growth per year in some departments. Well, let me tell you what this budget is. It is the transfer of wealth from the makers to the takers, from the oil patch to government unions. Not even to private sector unions. There's a lot of private sector unions in the oil patch. They're being destroyed. This is all about government workers. Trouble is, as more and more oil companies lay off staff, cancel projects, or just go elsewhere, there are fewer and fewer makers left paying the bills for the takers. That's why the NDP is taxing more and borrowing more, so much more. They already proposed record debt, but even that's a lie. They're lying about everything from the future price of oil to the exchange rate to what their taxes will collect. I'll tell you what this budget is. It is like the Occupy Wall Street hippies were put in charge of the bank for 4 years. They're ransacking it. They're giving free stuff to their friends. They know they'll be kicked out in 4 years, but they don't care. They're going to wring everything out of it while they can. They're going to get while the getting is good before the makers take charge again. I predict the NDP will lose every single seat in the 2019 election. But so what? It'll still take 10 years after that to recover from their attack on the province. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.